when you're in the garden, and particularly with tomatoes, you're staking them and you're pruning them, and the leaves have this very green, oily, beautiful scent. And there's this whole journey of scent that goes from the plant to the fruit itself.
And you are left with the smell on your hands, and almost floral and kind of beautiful,
and
earthy and bitter, and all the complexity that goes into all of that.
And that we wanted to sort of tell that story through a fragrance, but not literally.
We've seen in the last few years so many brands come out that are gender inclusive, they're sustainably minded, or they are, clean, or have a minimalist design. All of these things are becoming more and more common, but that's been a part of your DNA at Malin & Goetz since the beginning.
It has
from the
indeed.
Thanks for noticing.
Yes, it's safe
Apparently
to say.
everyone else did as well.
Well, they've caught on.
Yeah.
But it's safe to say that you are trailblazers from the moment you started your apothecaries in 2004. And I really want to dive into the past, present, and future of the brand. But first, I wanted to start by asking you where you see the brand today, and where do you think the brand is going?
So I think the success of the brand has been its consistency, that we've never really wavered from whom we are and what we do. So scaling has happened not exponentially, it's happened at a very organic pace. And I think that's what's kept the DNA so solid. So where we are today is we're just a bigger version of where we were when we started, and where we will be tomorrow will hopefully be just a much bigger version of where we are today. Does that make sense?
Keeping it real since 2004.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's really important to both of us.
Yeah, I agree. The brand is it's still a small brand today in my mind. Maybe that
it's a little bit bigger than you think. I mean, compared to where we started. When we started, it literally was Malin & Goetz. Matthew sat at one end of the table, and I sat at the other. And our office was behind the store. And every time a customer would come in, which was not always so often at that point, someone would get up from the desk and wait on them. So we did everything. We packed boxes for Barney's. We waited on customers. We cleaned the store. It was very, very hands-on.
Yeah. But where it is today is exactly where I think we always intended and hoped that it would be, and that is for it to feel and be a gender-neutral brand that's New York-centric or urban-centric and focused on making skincare easy for people.
I love that. So you hinted on this a little bit, but could you take me back to that first moment when you both decided to start the brand? Bring us back in a time machine.
I had been with Kiehl's back in the mid to late 90s, and Kiehl's was sold to L'Oreal, and Andrew, whose family is very entrepreneurial, had said, Kiehl's was sold to L'Oreal, and I had been a buyer for Barney's prior to that, which is how I ended up working for Kiehl's, where we were buying brands that didn't exist in the marketplace. So we launched Stila and NARS and Philosophy and Kiehl's and L'Occitane and all these brands that are sort of like,
known,
yeah, exactly. And all of them, well, most of them had been sold off to big corporations at a certain point. And we were watching that happen. And so Andrew had said, there's this moment in time now where we could sort of pick up where, let's say, for instance, a Kiehl's is left off and be family owned and operated and do something that's not Kiehl's, but very modern and forward thinking.
Yeah, I think that was
simplistic.
Super important that we weren't trying to recreate something or imitate something. We were looking maybe at the same apothecary roots, but from a completely different lens. Like, how could we be modern and minimalist and completely efficacious?
Yes.
And a reflection of how we actually lived our lives.
Yeah, and if you think about brands, if you can think about brands 20 years ago, they were really overpackaged and very complicated with hundreds of products and many steps. Yes, exactly. So the regimens were difficult to sort of wrap your head around. And what if you could take sort of Andrew's less is more Neutrogena approach and say, well, we're just going to make luxury really accessible and easy and uncomplicate the whole process for anyone. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or what your skin type is. In fact, if you're a couple, wouldn't it be great if you could use and share those products?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I can attest to that as a longtime customer. Like from the dark rum candle to the eucalyptus deodorant, my husband and I are constantly, I'm like, where's my deodorant?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I thought this was mine, because
That's
it's
awesome.
so inclusive and it's something that we can share. It's one of the few items that in our bathroom, in our vanity areas, we're able to share. So
Yeah, if you're a really good customer, you say steal
steal.
from
Oh, yes.
from your partner.
Well, I do have a mini eucalyptus deodorant that I keep for my purse, and he's constantly stealing it.
Yes.
Let me just put that on record. And I'm like, where is my purse deodorant? I want
Those
to
are
bring
our
it with
most
me.
loyal customers, the ones who
It's
you know.
great. It's great to hear those stories 20 years later, because 20 years ago, it was a very difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around.
Oh, yes.
And really, most brands were segregating regimens for a man or a woman, and then specifically for a variety of skin types and how people sort of went through the routine through the day. And we just tried to democratize the whole idea and
Yeah.
make it really simple.
But-
I hate to keep saying the same word
But
over and over
it
again.
wasn't simple
But
because
still.
people have a very confined way of thinking. So I remember when we were pitching the brand to Barney's, who's going to be our big national retailer, and they said, well, do you want to be in the women's department or the men's department? And we're like, well, we need to be sort of in both because we sell to both. And it was very, very difficult for them to get behind that concept. Obviously they did, and it was very,
Eventually,
very,
right.
we launched with Barney, so they did buy into it, but it was a lot of I think that was the only time we really were great salesmen, is when we convinced Barney's that they had to be
there are many stores. I mean, we would have perfumeries approach us about our fragrances at some point, and we were like, well, we really want to present ourselves as a complete brand,
Right.
so that people are able to shop across categories and enter the brand in a way that they're comfortable, but be able to find their items head to toe that are appropriate for whatever their regimen happens to be, whatever theirs and their partner's regimens might be even. So
Yeah, the brand is really for everyone. And I think the approachability is really what brings people in.
Correct.
Like, you can understand everything that's on the package. It's very clear. You're making something that probably has a complex formulation very simple,
but
in the
transparent.
translation.
Thank you.
And the
Yeah.
packaging was intended to be very not transparent that you see through it, but to have all the ingredients, everything
Yes.
listed on the front, that we weren't trying to hide anything. It was just very clinical and efficient.
yeah, so
Yeah,
when you talk about
Efficacious.
Yes.
and when you talk about clean today, we'd never felt the idea that we had to jump on the bandwagon to say we were clean, because
Mhm.
we were always showing what our ingredients were, and we were always talking about how this formula was appropriate for sensitive skin, because I started from that perspective. So having to say that we're clean when we've always been that way
Right.
didn't really seem necessary.
It isn't. You didn't have to. And now there's a little bit of backlash where customers, I know it's more common in the EU. There's like a pretty big definition of clean.
Correct.
But for US customers, we're starting to go, what does clean actually mean here, right? If there's no
The
regulation.
customer is
Yeah.
ultimately very, very smart
Mhm.
and clever, and they figure out all the marketing
Yes.
hooplas that go on. And I think if you actually speak to your customer in a very honest, authentic way, then you don't have to worry about that backlash.
And the
Yeah.
And
forerunner
that's what
to
we've
clean,
tried to do.
the forerunner to clean was natural. So it was like
Mhm.
this whole thing. Like, there was no real definition of what it meant to be natural. And yeah, we've always used natural ingredients, but they're not the only thing that make up our formula. In fact, our focus has been less on being natural or being clean, but being more on being efficacious, using the right ingredients for the right product, and making sure that it doesn't irritate you.
Right, and the right formulations. As I always say, poison ivy is natural as well. Cyanide
that.
isn't natural. So natural isn't always necessarily better. It's about how you use nature fused with the ingenuity of science. And I think that's what we really have worked so hard to do.
science and nature. And that's really that apothecary feel that's really present in each of your locations.
Thank you.
I love going into the stores because even when I travel, it like feels like, okay, this is a safe place to land. This is home. I know what it's going to be. I can get my travel items and, use them up while I'm on this vacation and bring them back home. And I know what to expect.
Oh, that's
So
great.
I'm a huge fan of your brand. I'm
Oh,
not
thanks.
just saying
Well, it
that.
sounds like it. You're delivering for us. We don't even need to say anymore.
Well, it's better to hear from you, from the creator. So talking a little bit more about your founding story, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but if we can talk about those early days in Chelsea where it's just Mal and Jess Getz in the store, could you tell me about a moment where you really realized like, oh, this is our brand, like we've arrived?
Yeah, we put together this whole concept for the brand, and part of the launch of the brand was our own freestanding store, our own e-com website 20 years ago, and then distribution at Barney's nationally, which included New York and Beverly Hills, and then we also launched Liberty in London all at the same time. So same day, same time with 12 SKUs.
Wow.
So we had face, body, and hair. And I remember we opened our doors and we're packing boxes up in the back for maybe Barney's or something. And a customer walks in, and, back then, we'd get like a customer in an hour or something walking into the store. And so, it was like a big deal. And you'd go up to the front and they'd say, okay, tell me, what is this? What is this brand? And you'd say, oh, we're about making skincare easy and uncomplicated. Oh, that's great. How do you do that? And so then you start to explain it, and then you'd be like, but how does that work for me? And, and all of a sudden, like, it became like a teaching moment where like, okay, how are we going to really get over this hump where, we have to explain to somebody that this facial cleanser is really great. And, sampling, and I mean, as Scentbird probably knows better than anybody, like that it's a key, but certainly like, finessing your spiel is an important
But
aspect.
the momentum did
Yeah.
build very,
course.
very
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
Like, I mean, the first day was like nerve-wracking and everything. But then having Barney's be our national retailer and Liberty in London and having our fledgling website, we just had so much energy going in and out of that store. I mean, our dogs were there. So, they were always sitting there in the
Little
window. So
kitties.
people came in, and I think people just loved coming into the store, even just to chat half the time.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea 20 years ago, it was such a great sort of crossroads of individual, like the neighborhood was young and it was
Yes.
full of energy and creative spirit, and it was right that crossroads between like Greenwich Village and Uptown, and sort of it was just like a very interesting group of affluent young people who were looking for something new and what was happening. So everyone was kind of open to the idea, even if they didn't get it at first.
Yeah, they were ready for something new and something approachable that they can understand. And I know we talked about this a little bit, but I think the steps in the process, right? So did you have customers coming in trying to buy a specific regimen and maybe
Yes.
expecting 20 steps and getting having an aha
Our joke
moment?
in the store was always like, we want to sell you less product. And
The hurdle that
So rare.
the hurdle that I was speaking about, somebody would come in, I'd give them the spiel, and how is it right for me? I mean, we didn't have a toner. We still don't have a toner. And in fact, we never saw a toner as necessary. And in fact, when you have to explain this to somebody, well, why don't you have a toner? Well, toners are there to remove excess dirt, oil, and cleansers that's been left behind. But if your cleanser removes the dirt and the oil and it washes clean, why would you need an extra step to just create more irritation onto your skin? So,
Wow.
yeah.
because most people actually don't really know what a toner is.
I don't know what it. I don't.
It's
I
a
use
great
one,
it's a
but-
great marketing campaign, but most toners are actually have alcohol in it, which is very drying. They tend to have fragrance, which can be irritating, and so they can be very stripping and unbalancing. And if, as Matthew said, if you have a great cleanser that washes away clean, doesn't leave a residue, isn't irritating in any way, and then you hydrate immediately after, why do you need to have another unnecessary step other than to sell somebody an
an
unnecessary
additional
product?
There's a real honesty in your approach to the brand, I think that customers may not have expected, right? It's,
Correct.
you're saying you don't need all of these products. You can use less. You can do more with less, which I think is another like really great part of the brand. Like you know what you're getting and you know that it's going to work. And it's so awesome.
Oh, thank
Well,
you.
thanks.
So let's segue a little bit into talking about scent, right? Your brand, of course, started as an all-over beauty brand, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about fragrance later, but first I wanted to see if we can get some insights from both of you on what were your earliest scent memories? Like when did you first discover fragrance?
So, I mean, I probably remember the first perfume or cologne. I don't know what it was. I know it was probably Paco Rabanne in like 1977 or something. And I thought it was really cool. But I don't know if that's my first memory of scent. So my first memory of scent it's really comes from cooking. I mean, like food is scent for me in a weird way. I mean, it's not what you want to wear necessarily, but those are the things that evoke. That's my Proustian experience of emotion. And then as I got older and you have other scents enter into your life, it becomes much more of a sophisticated and nuanced experience. But I would say food is one of my first memories of scent.
What kind of food, actually?
My grandmother's roasted chicken. I mean,
maybe we need to make a roasted chicken candle.
No,
I don't think we should.
We're almost there with tomato.
Right, exactly.
No, we don't need to do that. I mean, there's certain things that they live in separate categories. But
Andrew, so Andrew's a great cook, by the way, and one of his specialties is roast chicken.
My grandmother's roasted chicken.
Are you going to share the recipe?
I can, of course. It's very simple, like everything Malin gets. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. And places also have a scent for me, and experiences have a scent. Like scent is always associated with memory.
Absolutely.
For me. So depending about that experience, there is a scent associated with it, which I hope to some degree that we have conveyed in the scents that we actually and parfums that we manufacture.
Yeah, absolutely. Scent and memory are so linked. And that's why it's so interesting to figure out or to hear from people what their early scent memories are. So yours was cooking, right? Your grandmother's roast chicken and this beautiful fragrant, I'm imagining a display. I'm actually getting really hungry. But Matthew, how about for you? What are some of your earliest scent memories?
So there's two. And the first, I'll start with the second one. The second one, which is earliest probably, is when I was very young, my mother and father would leave me with my grandmother. She would watch me during the day.
And a roast chicken?
No. So I had a Hungarian grandmother, and she lived in a very small little house in Flint, Michigan.
That's where I was born.
Me too. St. Joseph's Hospital, Flint, Michigan.
Yeah. Flint Osteopathic Hospital.
Wow. Well, I knew I liked you for some reason.
Obviously. Midwest in the house.
So my grandmother had a really small little property, and as a farmer growing up in Hungary, she grew all her own vegetables and flowers and what have you. So her entire backyard, which was maybe a quarter of an acre, was a garden. Wow. And I just remember being really young and walking through like the little paths through the garden and, the flowers, and she snapdragons and 4 o'clocks and various, flowers. I remember that distinctly, and the smells and sort of just the moments of being there.
Wow.
That would be the second one. The first one, though, is probably sitting with my mother when she would get ready in the morning, and she'd put on makeup, and she'd sit at her vanity with a little mirror in front of her, and just the smell of the makeup, which always had like, that sort of rose scent or whatever it is that was in makeup 20 years ago. Oil of Olay, she used that to moisturize her face. Iconic. So whatever those scents were, those sort of really subtle, floral, rosy kinds of scents, I remember that distinctly. And both of these are sort of in these beautiful, warm, hazy clouds
Yeah, and you both are talking about family members. You both have stories with your grandmothers, so there's like a nurturing and there's like a piece of love, right? With scent
Absolutely. I
and
mean, that's the best part of memory is to have a good one,
yes,
right? Not the bad ones.
bad ones. What are those? So I know you talked a little bit about Paco Rabanne, but I wanted to know if you had any fragrances that you wore early on, or if you could take us through your journey in personal fragrance.
This is scary.
Well, I've already fessed up to my Paco Rabanne journey. I'm sure there were other things along the way.
I
The
think
Comme des Garçons, maybe as I got
Ooh.
more sophisticated. But I actually became I was very sensitive to scent, and I tended to not wear a scent in general. And then having spent time in Europe where everyone wears so much scent,
Yes.
that almost put me more firmly in the camp of like not necessarily wearing a scent unless it was a special occasion. But I think that's a very cultural thing.
Yes.
Europeans, it's like putting on your t-shirt, you put on a scent. In America, it tends to be a little bit different.
More of an accessory.
It's an accessory, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, as a young boy from Michigan, I distinctly remember forcing my parents to buy me Drakkar Noir. And I'm
Mhm.
not proud of that.
I've smelled a lot of that in my life.
Well, we
Have
won't
you ever
hold it.
smelled
We
it?
won't hold it against you.
No,
It was
no.
a mistake of youth.
But
What can we say?
it was probably the start of really wanting to buy those kinds of things, for sure.
Yeah, that first taste of fragrance. For me, there's like a lot of Bath and Body Works in my scent journey.
Sure.
So I know the brand began as an apothecary for skincare and body care as well. But could you tell me a little bit about how you started the fragrance side of your business?
The genesis was the first year of business at Malin & Gatz, and we had only launched with skincare, body care, and hair care.
Mhm.
We were asked to speak at a Women's Wear Daily conference, and we went down there, and we gave
To
our
Miami.
spiel,
Yeah.
and Michel Mann of Mann Fragrances
Mhm.
was, for whatever reason, impressed with what he heard.
He was in the audience. He
And he
came
said-
up to us
And
afterwards.
he said, "You guys need to do a fragrance." And we looked at him and we said, "But we're not a fragrance house." He's like, "I want you to come into my office and let's see if we can create a fragrance around the philosophy of your brand."
Yeah, no, what he said was, I understand your skincare focused business. Come pitch your concept to my perfumers and let them help you create a fragrance based on your concept.
Oh, wow.
And we were like, that's a challenge. And we were like, okay, cool. And that's what we did.
But in a weird way, it was very complimentary because we didn't use any artificial fragrance in our skincare. And yet we knew an olfactory experience was really, really important. And in many cases, the reason we didn't include a fragrance in our skincare is because we didn't want our skincare to be a human diffuser. But
Right.
was there an opportunity to talk about our minimalism and simplicity of the brand via an olfactory experience and that whole idea of balance of yin and yang? And so it was a great
It was the start of a really beautiful relationship. In fact, we've been friendly with Michel Mann and the team there since almost since day one. And in fact, we just had lunch with Michel this past year, and we do usually on a yearly basis. So.
and it opened up a whole new unintended concept for us, and something that, in spite of my earlier declining of that I don't like fragrance, it was epiphanic. Like, oh wow, this is great, and we really enjoyed it, and it really unleashed a lot of creative spirit amongst the two of us in a way that it was totally unexpected.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
And it helped us reinterpret our brand's position as a skincare business, which really was focused on not being irritating to the skin or having any sort of artificial fragrance that could irritate the skin. And so it allowed us to create a separate category of candles and fragrances that could be integrated into a regimen without you having to feel like we were perfuming your face.
Exactly. You took the fragrance concept as something that's kind of separate from your original origin, but it still was a way to expand your brand, right?
Correct.
And speak to the minimalism and the aesthetic in a different way.
Yes.
Because I know I keep my candle after I burn it, I clean it out, put some flowers in there.
That's what we like to
Excellent.
hear.
Yes.
You know?
Recycle, reuse.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. I was definitely born in the 80s. Yes. I hear that the fragrance and candle categories are growing pretty fast for you. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. I would say fragrance is now our single fastest growing category. It's also our smallest category, just to put that in perspective, but fastest growing. So certainly there's a lot of interest in what we're doing, and yeah, people are buying. So
Yeah.
that's good.
I think the same approach you took to skincare and, the complicated nature of, okay, how many steps? I need a toner, I need a serum, all of this stuff, and condensing it into something that's efficacious and that works really translated into your fragrances. Because, for instance, one of my favorites, dark rum, or you see like a tomato or something, you're like, I know what that is.
Yeah, it's very straightforward.
It's straightforward.
There's
but I know
no baroqueness into the naming of our fragrances. It's
Yes.
very linear.
But you still, I think of the word like simplexity, right? Because, there's a lot of thought that's put into it. And you're obviously not putting tomato juice into the candle, but there's kind of a, the essence of that single note ingredient that you're talking about in the fragrances. So I was wondering if you could share your approach to fragrance creation and how you bring a single note into a beautiful fragrance or home fragrance.
Well, I mean, different fragrances are inspired by different things. But since we were talking about tomato, maybe that's a good place to start. So Matthew and I are massive gardeners. We love gardening. We have an amazing garden at our house up in the Hudson Valley. And we weren't always great gardeners. It's something that we learned later in life. But
no, you weren't born with a green thumb.
I wasn't born with a garden. I mean, but anyway, it's something that we really have taken to. And one of the interesting things is when you're in the garden, and particularly with tomatoes, you're staking them and you're pruning them, and the leaves have this very green, oily, beautiful scent. And there's this whole journey of scent that goes from the plant to the fruit itself. And that we wanted to sort of tell that story through a fragrance, but not literally. But that was the inspiration.
And fragrance is also the more playful aspect of product development. It's as conceptual, but much more playful and easier just to sort of create something that feels like it doesn't have to be as serious, And so it is sort of the yin to the yang when you look at our brand from a perfumery to an apothecary perspective, or from a fragrance to a skincare perspective. There's this sort of balancing of these two ideas to create this regimen or to complement one another for you personally, if you choose to go that route.
Yeah.
And so fragrance is really this playful side of things where, if you're going to create a facial cleanser, it's pretty serious, and there's a clinical side to that is it's from a scientific perspective, it's very important that we get that right. And it's not to say that fragrance is any less complex in terms of that process, but it just comes off as being a lot more emotional and
I think for us
playful.
It's fun.
Right.
We've never tried to create fragrances that are so incredibly sophisticated that Marie Antoinette would have been wearing them. That's not who we are. We created fragrance that is sort of a reflection of our life, and the things that we enjoy. So
you said single note and the complexity of that. That actually was conceptually how we started fragrance. It was to take a singular note and to find the complexity within that one thing. And so originally, we had two scents that I created that are not the biggest sellers of our fragrance category. One was called Lotus Root, and the other one was called Synthesized Musk. And the idea was that they were basically these singular notes that I had found someplace, and I just wanted to make them complex and luxurious.
Yes, and that wasn't the only thing singular about them. There were singular sales too. So,
Like one sold.
Yeah. But, it was a great art project and we did enjoy it.
But tomato, dark rum, they are these singular ideas. And how do you create complexity around them? So Andrew just mentioned tomato in particular and sort of the complexity that sort of envelops that. And it really comes from this personal experience of gardening and the residue that's left on your hands, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a personal story and a journey and even a memory, right? Involved in the creation of your fragrances, it sounds like.
Correct.
Yes, there's a Madeleine, a Proust Madeleine in each one of our fragrances.
Also, if you're spending time in a garden and you are a gardener and you do spend time with a tomato plant and you are left with the smell on your hands, it's very specific and very unique. And it's not so much like, oh, I've created tomato sauce for my Italian spaghetti or whatever it is. It's really this idea of something very green and almost floral and kind of beautiful
and
earthy and bitter and all the complexity that goes into all of that.
Yes, I love it. I love it. That's one of my favorites. If you couldn't tell. So I want to talk a little bit about your partnership. So both of you are partners in life and partners in business, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
So how does that work? How do your skill sets complement each other and help to create this growing, thriving business that you both have?
Well, I think we're, you know what they say, opposites attract. We definitely are opposite on every single level, which is very complementary. So we both have very different skill sets. There's overlap on some things. And I think there's probably a lot of disagreements as well. But I think in some way those disagreements are always really helpful because it helps really hone the best idea. So the best idea usually wins because neither one of us are total egomaniacs where we have to always be right. So I think that's been part of the success of the business is that each of our skill sets are so different and our ways of thinking are so different that we can both see a great idea germinating regardless of whom gives birth to it.
And from the very
Yeah,
beginning,
that's important.
Andrew really is and comes from a very entrepreneurial family. So starting a business for him is really second nature. And in fact, probably one of the nicest stories that I have to tell is when we were in, and I come from exactly the opposite. My dad worked for the same company his entire career. My mother
Right.
was a stay-at-home mother. They were very conservative Midwesterners. Andrew's parents, had their own businesses. They're New Yorkers. They're much more adventurous. And so when we were going to start this business, I remember saying to my parents over the phone, so we've got this idea, we're going to start this business and, Andrew and I are going to do it together and we're going to bring together his world of design and my world of beauty. And my parents were like, that's great. So what if it doesn't work? Have you figured out how you're going to live? What are you going to do? How are you going to make money? And for 2 hours, they grilled me. And,
Yeah.
at the end of 2 hours, they were like, we'll support you. And if it doesn't work and you have to move back home, you can. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to make this work. And then
Gotta make it work. Can't go
You
back.
can imagine how I felt.
and then, maybe 2 weeks later, Andrew's parents were home from a trip that they had a 3-month tour of South America that they had taken where they flew their own plane across the continent and saw these exotic places and were
amazing.
determined to take us to a Spanish restaurant where they could show us that they learned Spanish and they could speak to the staff in Spanish.
Yeah,
We're sitting there,
right.
we're like, so we've got this business idea. And they're like, yeah, that's great. Just do it. And then they just changed the subject. And I was like, oh my God. It was just
Opposites.
they didn't, nothing.
It just happened. It seems like you also complete each other's sentences and you have a great flow. And I think it's really a testament to your partnership and it comes through in the products because family-owned businesses don't always thrive the way yours do. So it's really interesting.
Partnerships, regardless whether they're family
You're right.
or just purely professional, they're really difficult. I think one of the benefits of having your partner in life be your partner in business is that there's hopefully nobody in the world you trust more.
That's true.
Yes.
And that is an amazing, amazing thing. But it's also difficult because your work comes home with you and it doesn't, your partner, if it's a professional partner, doesn't come home with. So you have to figure out how to live with both in the same room. And that takes time.
But you do. But, so.
We did. We're almost 20 years into this. And here we are. So
and 30 years into our personal relationship. So,
right.
Wow.
So, it's kind of one of those situations where, and most people have these experiences where you move in together with your partner, right, for the very first time. And what do? You fight over the sock drawer, right? And you're committed to one another. So you figure it out and you move on.
Right.
And, 10 years later, we started a business together and we fought over the sock drawer a little bit. And, and then we moved on, and I think you just, as long as you're committed to the relationship, you keep finding the compromise.
And a good therapist is always highly recommended.
Therapy works, y'all. We are advocates for therapy.
Yes, mental health therapy.
Mental health is important. Protect yourself.
And a martini every now and then doesn't hurt either. So there's lots of tricks to get you through
You both
the
have
hurdles.
a great sense of humor too. So I'm sure
humor
that
is
hurt.
the most important thing. That is for sure.
And you both, I've heard this a few times. You've mentioned the yin and yang. Could either of you tell me a little bit more about how that's represented either in your partnership or your business? What does that symbol mean?
It's an underlying theme or concept for the entire brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to start this off, if you look at our logo, it's Malin plus Gets, and it's in parentheses, and it's a formula for balance.
Wow.
So Malin Gets, cleanser, moisturizer, dry,
women
oily,
men.
men, women. All these sort
something
of opposite
natural,
ideas.
Something scientific.
Yes.
So that even in as mentioned in the logo of the brand, this is whole embodiment of balance or yin and yang, which also accompanies us in life as well.
Yes, and even when we were talking about fragrance, when we initially, this starts to get very detailed, and we don't have to go into much detail about it.
Let's do it. Let's dive in.
But when we first started thinking about fragrance, it was so. If I back up a little bit more, as we looked at skincare and we started thinking about sort of what that assortment would be and how to simplify it, it really was, how do you create balance to the skin? So if you're going to wash the skin and cleanse it, you will probably remove some level of oil that you will want to replenish. So you're going to need to moisturize it thereafter, creating perfect pH balance to the skin. Nothing more, nothing less. A good cleanser and a good moisturizer for your face, for your body, for your hair, or your scalp. That's the head-to-toe approach for balance. And as we started to think about fragrance, it was a similar idea, although it's morphed into something else, but still part of this idea that we would create two fragrances, one that Andrew liked and one that I liked, one that was maybe fresh and clean and warm and soft. And when you wore one,
of course,
well, and they were
Obviously.
each single notes. And when you wore one, you got this experience, or when you wore the other, you got the opposite experience. But when you wore them together, whether you layered them yourself or you just were together as a team,
Yes.
then it created a singular scent.
Yeah, it was like this whole
love that.
complementary concept, which is not so different than a cleanser and a moisturizer, or a shampoo and a conditioner.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole idea of balance.
So that was the pitch to the perfumer specifically, how we were going to create these sort of balanced ideas of scents.
Ah, that is so cool.
Yes.
There's really balance in everything you do. And like, you're blowing my mind with like, the logo is a formula. And I'm like, oh my God, I can see all of it. It's so straightforward. And aren't we all looking for a little bit of balance in our everyday lives?
Hallelujah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your inspirations. I know for your fragrances, you've mentioned tomato and where that comes from, but would you mind speaking more broadly about how you concept fragrances and what you're inspired by?
Yeah.
I mean, it really varies. I mean, gardening is a big theme for us. Strawberry certainly is something that was born out of the garden. But there are other things that are really traditionally apothecary. So
and perfumery.
And perfumery. I meant perfumery. Pardon me.
Both.
Leather, for example, is very, very old traditional scent. And what I think that one of the great tenets of the brand is that we've taken things that are classic and we always make it modern. So we pare it down, strip it down, and make it really special in a very minimalist, modern way. And when I think about our leather eau de parfum, it's really the embodiment of that. And it also involves memory as well. So leather is traditionally used in old perfumeries, you know, on tanneries and things like that. But for me, leather was like, I remember going down to Greenwich Village and buying my first leather jacket, and it was used in that supple feeling, and it had a very distinct smell, and I felt great in it. That to me is the embodiment of that fragrance. So it's very, very personal. But I think that you can have your own experience with leather.
But to the point of balance, you know, we think about perfumery and apothecary, and sort of those are the starting points for where our fragrances are going to be. So there is a much more scientific idea behind perfumes and perfumery, and then these romanticized ideas. So maybe one of the more scientific concepts for perfumery is rose, for apothecary is rose. So it can be used for medicinal purposes, and as Andrew was just saying, it could have been used, and probably was most likely the use, to hide the scent of the smell of the animal on leather. So it was used with tanneries back then. So you'd put rose on top of, like, if you had just commissioned to have a pair of leather gloves made, they would have probably been scented with rose. And there would have been this little hint of something animal, something very raw, with rose. And so initially there was this idea when we were trying to create a rose scent and a leather scent that there would be one scent, and it would be those two things together. And we couldn't really make it work. And so as we deconstructed that, Otto, which is a candle of ours, which is based on Bulgarian rose, is that rose. And leather itself became sort of this idea of something sort of warm and soft, and the rose something fresh and crisp. And if you burn the leather candle with the rose candle, how they become this idea of what perfumery and apothecary and all these conceptual ideas of how leather and rose were used hundreds of years ago.
But I think one of the most interesting things that we had done is going back to the roots of perfumery. It's completely gender neutral. Gender perfumes is a 20th century invention. So we were like, we're just going to make things that smell great. And it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. If you like it, fantastic. But we erased all gender from our fragrances. And it was really that the fragrances were just going to stand alone on how beautiful they are.
And we also tried really hard to make sure that our leather didn't smell like the traditional, more masculine versions of leather that are out there, that it really smelled gender neutral, like a leather would smell. Like if you have a leather jacket and you're a woman and you like the way that smells, or if you're a man and you have a leather jacket, it doesn't matter. It just smells like leather. And similarly with rose, if you were applying rose to your skin to calm it, or you were using it for a medicinal purpose, it wouldn't matter if you were a man that was doing that because you were carrying an ailment, or if you're a woman that was doing that. So how do you create this rose then that doesn't smell traditionally like that sweet, cloying, feminine idea of rose, or your grandmother's rose, or whatever that is, that it is in fact something more neutral that anyone can embrace?
Yeah. And I'm also hearing in your stories, there's the bringing the apothecary or the old or the before, the tradition into the modern age by bringing that gender neutral for everyone.
Yeah, everything has to have a reference point. I mean, we're not just inventing things out of thin air, but we're looking at things that are, essentially classic, and looking at a way to rework them and make them modern and contemporary. And I think that's the really fun part of the creative aspect of making a fragrance.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And also something we didn't invent. I mean, honestly, you would have used rose for those things that I just mentioned 200 or 300 years ago, and it wouldn't have mattered if you're a man or a woman. Like it just, and you would have scented yourself with it as well, and it just smelled nice.
People literally didn't bathe. You had to continue to. So now it has a different raison d'etre, thankfully.
Thankfully. Thank you for all of our noses.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'd love to talk about your fragrances more specifically. I know you have two collections. You have the Unflorals and you have the Vices. Could you tell us about each of those collections and what they represent for the brand?
Yeah.
Sure. Do you want to start with Unflorals or Vices?
Sure. Conceptually, I think we touched on this already. We have we've thought about this in terms of how we're going to create balance. So these ideas of something really fresh and clean with something really soft and warm, and how if you wear them together, they create balance. We also have thought about this from a gender neutral perspective. And certainly if you think about floral and traditionally and conceptually how it's really presented as a female scent, we wanted to make it not female. We wanted to take florals and make them seem unfloral.
But we were also celebrating not only the blossom of the flower, but the stem and the leaves. So it became this unfloral celebration of a flower,
correct,
or something that grows. And I think we weren't looking at it singularly,
no.
which is what I think makes it so dynamic.
Yeah. So if you go back to sort of the bergamot idea and a singular note, bergamot is quite complex for a single note. It is something green, it's something citrus, and it's something floral. And there is this aspect of a bergamot tree flowering and the floral idea of what you get from that, but it's not the only piece of it.
Right. You're celebrating all of the parts of the plant that is flowering. I love that concept. Yeah. Could you tell me about Vices as well?
Vices?
Well, we don't have any, of course.
No.
Only in our collection.
We're teetotal over here.
So the first Vice was really dark rum, and it was a scent that we created that Andrew was like, this is a winner. Yeah. And I was like, no, it's not. and it really, we decided to name it rum for a variety of reasons. I mean, one of them was we had just been to Mexico and were drinking mojitos on the beach at a wedding. And we decided we wanted to sort of deconstruct this idea of a mojito. And so rum was one half of it and lime and peppermint was the other, which became our mojito candle. And together they became this one scent that was the mojito itself. But the Vices sort of grew because dark rum took on a life of its own. And people loved it and just really it resonated. It became a signature scent of ours. And so we decided we wanted to do another one because it was fun and playful, like what we're talking about. So cannabis was the next one.
So cool. Iconic.
Yes,
an iconic launch.
Exactly.
And, it's fun to be a little naughty.
And also very medicinal and scientific. I mean, cannabis has been used in apothecaries for hundreds of years. It's a medicinal ingredient that works.
Some would say rum is medicinal as well if you're having a bad day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So interesting enough, for cannabis for me, I had lived in Amsterdam for a long time, and talk about memory, I always remember like riding my bicycle through central Amsterdam, and they would have all the coffee shops, quote unquote. And there was an effluvium of cannabis coming out of there. And whenever I smell cannabis, it just takes me right back to that particular time and place. And I thought, oh, this would be really fun to capture in a candle. And of course, it's not a literal translation. It's not meant to be literal.
Right.
But the idea is how to evoke that memory and have a little fun doing it. And that's where cannabis was very special for me.
I love it.
Blooms and has a floral.
Yeah, it's technically an unfloral as well.
Correct.
It's peppery. And,
but it's very complex as a plant. And there are ways to sort of highlight that complexity that we feel we've done.
No pun intended. On the highlighting.
I got it.
Yeah, okay. Highlighting.
The puns never stop. Never.
And you have it in a candle, right? It's lit.
Oh,
exactly.
Awesome. So I'm excited.
Dazed and perfumed, as we say.
Dazed and perfumed.
Yeah.
I love that movie, by the way. So I'm excited to dive into some more stories from fragrances. And I know we've talked about quite a few of the heroes and the icons in your fragrance collection. But I was hoping we can dive into each of them individually.
Yeah.
So the first one I would like to discuss is an unfloral, and it's your vetiver fragrance.
Our
Could you tell me
favorites.
about that? That's a favorite?
I think it's maybe one of both are shared because we don't
Yeah.
agree on everything, as you may have learned. But that one I think we do agree on.
Yes, out of all of our scents, I can say it's the one I probably wear the most.
Wow.
And it's very specific because if you're a perfume aficionado, you probably think of vetiver more as like a masculine scent. And we worked really hard to sort of not have it be that. So it lives in the unfloral because vetiver is really a grass. It's green. It's not meant to smell as woody or as heavy or as smoky as what many vetivers. And why it's leaned masculine, we have no idea. But it really lives in sort of this world as not being something masculine to us or something that feels, it's certainly not a vice, but really lives as an unfloral and in both its concept and its use.
Yeah, it's fresh without being cloyingly fresh or
functional.
Obviously fresh. There's a cleanliness to it and a greenness to it that is just I find just super sexy and attractive.
And it just also has like a real warmth and
warmth is probably the best way to describe
like
it.
a fresh warmth. Is that possible?
Everything's possible.
It is with vetiver, your fragrance, the yin and the yang coming together. That's awesome. Okay, I would love to talk about one of your newest creations, strawberry.
Strawberry has been such a great success for us. So, as Andrew mentioned, we're gardeners, and we have probably one of the hardest things that we found to garden has been strawberries. They are not so difficult to grow, but as the adage goes, everybody likes a strawberry. So every chipmunk likes a strawberry, every deer likes a strawberry, every insect likes a strawberry, and they are just so much work to produce and to keep.
To protect.
To protect, exactly. So, after a year of producing this wonderful crop of strawberries, we were thinking about like what our next fragrance idea was going to be. And I said, we should do a strawberry concept. And there was some backlash, like, that's how did you describe it? What's the nice way that you can put it?
I don't know if that's broadcastable, but I think when you think of the word strawberry, there's so many things associated. You associate something very sweet, cloying, vanilla, very young, almost preteen like.
Yeah, you mentioned Bath and Body Works.
Exactly.
Correct.
And so one of our ways or the way our humor works is like, what if we name something like that, which sounds, maybe awful, but then when you use it, you realize, oh my God, this is so sophisticated and so great. And when I think of a strawberry, having lived in Holland, the word for strawberry actually means earthberry because the fruit sits on the ground. And so wouldn't it be fun to celebrate all the other aspects besides the sweet vanilla cloying aspect of strawberry, but to call it strawberry? And so it would be a surprise. And because I think a lot of people would probably have an aversion, like, oh, I'm not going to wear something, particularly a guy.
Right.
Well, it's also this yin and yang idea of like, you expect it to be one thing, but you're delivered another. And conceptually, how do you take what people expect from strawberry, which is this sweet, cloying, sort of youngish-like scent, and make it exactly the opposite of that, make it sophisticated, and really make it in a way for which we all actually eat a strawberry. Like, as a man, I could have a strawberry every single day.
Yeah.
And similarly, so could you. And we wouldn't think about it in terms of gender.
Nope.
And so why should we do that with a fragrance?
Exactly. I think one of the interesting parts is like you mentioned, you have this preconceived notion of a strawberry. So I wouldn't like come into a fragrance that I would wear on my body knowing what that's going to smell like. So the surprise element is really interesting. And it's fun to know that you guys kind of had that in mind as you were creating it. Like, let's make it work. Like, let's make fetch happen. Let's make the strawberry actually something that's really complex, surprising, and wearable.
It was like a wink and a nod. It was meant to be intentionally misleading and funny. But once you are in on the joke, you're so happy to be in on the joke.
And I don't know that I'm supposed to tell this part of the story, but So when we came up with the concept, we told the one woman who works in our office who does product development and is in charge of product development, who's terrific, by the way. Hello.
Shout outs to you.
and I told her very specifically, I was like, you're not allowed to tell anyone about this because, and she was like, why not? And I was like, because we just want to call it strawberry and everyone's going to be a naysayer to this. But no matter what, we're just going to do this. And she was like, I love that. And so we kept it secret until the very end. And then, of course, when we said, okay, we've created the scent, here it is, and we're calling it strawberry, everyone was like, no, you can't do that.
And of course, it's one of our best-selling products.
Yes, we
Rule
told,
breakers.
yeah.
You took a risk and it paid off.
Yeah.
Yes.
People like a little surprise and delight, and that's really awesome.
Yeah. And I think they like a wink and a nod as well.
Yes. Okay, so to wrap up our conversation, I would like to play a little game with you both. Are you game?
Sure,
Yeah.
we love a good game.
Yes. Okay. So basically, you will write down what you think the other person's favorite scent is or favorite smell is, and then you write down the person's least favorite smell, and then we'll reveal them to each other and see if you got it right.
Right.
Okay.
Are you ready?
So I'm going to write it down.
Yep. Write it down.
On my.
Andrew, what do you think Matthew's favorite and least favorite scents are?
Okay.
How about
Okay.
5 more seconds?
All right.
You good?
I've been taking a stab.
All right. Okay. Matthew, please reveal what you believe Andrew's favorite scent to be.
Roast chicken.
It's roast chicken deja vu. Sure. I will go with that because we've already talked about my grandmother's roast chicken, and life doesn't get better than that.
All right, good.
What about his least favorite scent?
So I'm a little stumped here. However, this may reveal itself in another way, but I'm going to say his least favorite scent happens to be rose.
So, interestingly enough, that is not my least favorite scent.
Oh.
If you recall a certain trip to Singapore,
Oh,
the
yeah.
durian.
But I wouldn't have guessed that because you don't bring that up regularly.
I bring it up every time I have Thai food. So I do talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a topic of conversation.
Yeah, honestly, Andrew's, you don't really have a lot of scents that you don't like.
Durian, I really don't like.
Yeah. Well, nobody likes that.
So we're not sending you
all South Asia loves it. What are you talking about?
So we shouldn't send you a fruit basket of durian unless we wanted you to hate us.
Well, I'm always willing to try something over again, but the first experience was not really particularly good.
Fair. I think
So-
a lot of people would agree that they don't, unless they're used to
Culturally,
culturally,
yes.
they wouldn't normally be like, you know what I love? The
yeah.
smell of
Ah,
durian.
the smell. I love the smell of durian in the morning.
Yes.
Yeah. Not really. Anyway. So
Okay. So let's do this in reverse. Andrew, could you tell us what you think Matthew's least favorite scent is?
So I'm going to go with wet dog because it combines both your fear of rain and an effluvium of dampness soaked up into a dirty dog.
Well, I think it's actually a really good guess. But because I just love dogs, it's
I'm
not
not saying
my
you hate the
least.
dog.
It's not my least favorite scent. But you're right. It wouldn't be like up there at the top.
All right. So what is your least favorite scent?
The first thing that came to mind
Durian?
for me is burning rubber.
Mm.
Oh yes, we
It's not great.
when the transmission fluid in the car.
Yeah.
When I shift
Things,
gears.
anything like that.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I think wet dog is actually something more appropriate.
No, I like dogs too much.
All right.
What do you think is Matthew's favorite
So
scent?
ironically, it is rose
Yes.
Yes.
because he already said it's my least favorite.
Which is why,
scent.
yes.
So, and I actually did write that down. So I'm not just.
We've got receipts here.
See,
is
I did put
totally
it there.
Facts. I can see it. You might not be able to see it,
Yeah.
but I can see it. He
And it
did
is
write
totally
rose.
my most favorite scent.
So,
I love a rose. I wear tea rose. Like
Yeah.
it's just my out of the shower
I wear
scent.
any
It's like a
rose.
$2 scent.
Yes.
Like love it.
so
Okay.
I guess I
love this.
win. I got the
You're actually a tie.
Yeah.
You both got one
one
right.
right. What did you?
You're
oh,
both
the roast
winners,
chicken.
though.
That's right. You
Chicken.
got the roast chicken. Okay.
But you gave that away earlier.
Yeah.
You're both winners.
Okay.
It's been awesome speaking with you
Thank
about
you.
your fragrances. You guys are awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I, I know it's a best love brand on Scentbird, and
Thank you.
can't wait to see what you guys come up with next.
Well,
We'll
thank
always
you.
be a fan.
Thanks. This is really fun. I hope we get to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
me too.
Thank you.